just kind of chat a bit.
That's okay. I'm used to no audience.
Hey, we're live. I brought on a Garage Geek to join me to bring no audience to our discussion of the Tower of Shadows, which is a new hardback book from both Fantagraphics and Marvel teaming up. A very unlikely team up, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. It is. I'm like the death of YouTube. So having me on your channel,
We got two viewers now. One of them might be one of us. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, I bring zero audience. I bring zero glitz, zero glamour.
Uh-huh.
But anyway,
well, hey, you have a cool shirt on though.
Oh, I love this shirt. Look at it. It's got amazing, incredible, mighty, and spectacular.
Ah, yes.
Isn't that cool?
So all of your own personal adjectives.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you introduced me, I need a couple adjectives, and you left those out, so that's fine though.
Well, I am the sleepy reader, and you are the Garage Geek.
Garrulous Garage Geek. All right, I'm ready. I've got like things everywhere. I've got a book, notes, an iPad.
Well, so I think this is called Lost Marvels because apparently these have never been reprinted. Yeah. Although I think they were reprinted, some of them in other comic books, but they've never been collected, I guess.
Yeah.
And Tower of Shadows was a return to original horror stories for Marvel after about 9 years of great success with superheroes. And I think the superhero sales and all the comic sales in general started going down after the cancellation of the Batman TV show. And so everyone was scrambling for how to get more readers. And so they thought, and I think Charlton and DC were already publishing some horror comics that were, I guess, doing okay. I couldn't find House of Mystery or House of Secrets, but Ghosts was another one they did. So Marvel decided to bring back this kind of horror comic also, a little bit in the EC Comics vein. Had you said you were researching EC Comics, or you were just researching one artist from EC Comics?
I was researching different artists as they pop up, and EC kept coming up. This is like loaded with EC references.
EC is the gold standard of horror comics for most comic book fans. And they always did 5 to 7 page stories, each with a shocking ending. And they famously were amongst the ones who were totally destroyed by the Comics Code. So that's another thing. I don't think they mention it in the intro here, but the Comics Code was beginning to loosen up at this time. And that's why another reason why they decided to try horror. So in the past, they had done monster magazines. This is a reprint, and back in the late 50s, early 60s. But this was more up close and personal horror rather than giant monsters.
Well, actually, now that you come to think of it, I didn't really think of this as I was reading it, but there's nothing really shocking in this. There's no like blood, gore, stabbings. There's like decapitations. There's none of that.
Right. But I think even doing stories about someone murdering their wife or something, which, EC did all the time, had become a no-no. But now it was okay to try it again, I think. But they loosened up the code progressively, I think, throughout the 70s. And this started in 1969 and went through 1970 before they started just doing reprints in it again.
Yeah.
So it was a failed experiment, which I guess is why it's lost Marvel.
Yeah.
But, well, I don't know what your opinion is, but I thought that most of the stories in here were extremely good. And the art was definitely peak 60s, early 70s artwork for the time. It felt like the artists were all doing their, on their best behavior, doing their best work when they were working for this magazine.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because it did say that in the introduction, it was one of the claims that this is the artists and the writers' best work because they were allowed to have that freedom of control. I didn't think that was true. Like, this is definitely not Neil Adams' best work. And like when so I just.
But how about some of the other artists?
I didn't think, like for example, Gene Colan. I didn't think it was his best. Buscema wasn't his best. I don't know what you think about Steranko. That was a beautiful piece in here.
I do think it was one of Steranko's best. I think some of the other artists were doing some of their better or, at their peak kind of work. I'm not saying they didn't do at their peak work elsewhere. The Neil Adams, I agree, was not one of Neil Adams' best. But
yeah,
I want to say hi to Donald, one of our favorite people on YouTube. And maybe I should have, if Donald has more copies of his books to sell, maybe I should have him on sometime.
He needs to sell 2 more, I believe, or at least 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Donald is putting together a hardback that we're all excited about, but it's kind of outside the realms of Tower of Shadows at the moment. Well, so you thought this was more minor work then?
Well, the stories. So we were kind of talking about this yesterday, and when I read a horror story, I want to be scared or thrilled. I want to walk away with these like ideas in my head that are like, that are going around in my head, and not many of these did that. And we are going to talk about, there's a couple of adaptations that are kind of H.P. Lovecraft kind of failed. But in one sense,
and they didn't put those adaptations in the book because I guess there's some copyright issues with H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a huge like, if you're on the fence of whether to buy this or not, to find out that it's not complete, that might tip people into not buying it. So there are 2 major omissions from this, and that is original work that was in the Tower of Shadows, but they're not here because they couldn't get copyright, and that's because they're H.P. Lovecraft.
Right. One was called The Terrible Old Man, and it was drawn by Barry Windsor Smith. Yeah. And the other was called Pickman's Choice or Pickman's something.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
And it was drawn by Tom Palmer. And they're both adapted H.P. Lovecraft stories, neither of which I'd ever heard of before. They're not the famous H.P. Lovecraft stories.
Yeah. So I had read the second one, and I thought it was effective, but you said that you didn't really think so. I think there's a reason why it wasn't effective, and when we get to that one, we could talk about it. But that's like a huge omission, right? When you're putting out something like this, I don't know if, I think they should have waited until they got the rights so that they could include it in something like this.
Well, I love this volume, and I guess they probably didn't know if they ever would get the rights.
That's true. It's beautiful. This book is absolutely stunningly
gorgeous. Wonderful matte paper, so it really recreates a very clear version, but feels like it's true to the original source. In fact, you can see the dots of color and things like that when you look closely at backgrounds.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous book.
They somehow managed to recreate the original color, but in this higher definition version. And it's, really nice binding, oversized. I think I have most of these issues in my collection. The only one I could quickly find was this one, issue number 6.
That's a great cover.
Ironically, this cover is for the one reprint inside. But
yeah,
I think that's a Marie Severin cover. And so they released, maybe the tradition is always sister comics like House of Mystery and House of Secrets. So they had a sister comic, Chamber of Darkness. And the intro guy made it out to be like one is sort of phallic and one is sort of vaginal, a chamber and a tower. Wow. But I don't think that equates at all with the kinds of stories that are in them. But I'd have to look closer for that. So I was hoping a Chamber of Darkness is going to come out next.
Me too. I would love that. Absolutely love that.
Hey, Tat. Yeah, Sunday's one of your work days, but thanks for dropping by.
Oh, okay. So there's so much to talk about with this.
Yeah.
But I'm going to let you kind of guide the conversation.
Well, we could address, Donald mentions breaking the fourth wall. At first, they have like a grave digger introducing the stories, but as it goes on, they switch and they have the artist of each story introduce the story. So
Yeah.
for
So that first
example,
happens in issue number 3,
uh,
and it's on it's Gary Friedrich, and it's
all
around
right. So
page
sometimes it's the writer, sometimes it's
5.
the artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
But I
anyway,
want to say before you move on,
yeah,
that issue has the most of narrative breaking. There, he does it 5 times within the story,
Gary
and
Friedrich. Yeah,
no one else does that. It's usually just the beginning and the end, but he pops up
right,
throughout the story on page 55, 57, 59, 60, and 61.
right.
So, I mean, he and it was really funny because they're all they're like psychedelic 60s dressed, and like look at him, he's trying to be hip, he's sitting on a stool here. It's it's pretty funny the way
Yeah,
the way
and
he
he's
pops in,
wearing beads,
and
and I think he has a
a vest,
vest. And they
and
mentioned how at this time Stan Lee was beginning to discover how popular he was on college campuses.
yeah,
So
there
I
he is
think
again.
one of the things they probably thought is that these were stories that would appeal to their college age or late teen readers
Yeah,
more than the superheroes.
yeah, look at him there, like he's giving us a hippie lecture. It's pretty funny. um but
So eventually this did not succeed. I love it. I would have bought it, or actually as a adult I would have bought it. But what succeeded in the horror vein was ongoing horror characters like Werewolf by Night, The Man Thing, Frankenstein, all of those kinds of things.
Dracula,
So the loosening
Ghost
of the
Rider.
comics code allowed them to do them, but more in the way that Marvel was used to doing them, in kind of a long-term soap operatic kind of adventures and soap opera mixed together, rather
Yeah,
than these short shocks. I think of them as being in the Twilight Zone vein rather than pure horror. So they might be a little spooky, or they might haunt your dreams a little bit, but they're not going to give you that, you know, Clive Barker or Stephen King kind of feeling. That's my take on it.
mm-hmm.
Do you want to start with one of your favorite stories, or shall we start with one of mine?
I Well, I think I know which one was your absolute favorites because you were talking about it. So why
Was
don't
it
you go
your
ahead?
absolute favorite too?
I have a couple, but I'd like to go with yours first, and I want to see if I'm correct because that's the one you were talking about.
Okay, I'm going to try with another camera. It comes from the very first issue, and it's the very first story. Let me get my.
So I was wrong. I thought you picked the one that was in the Mad vein, the Mad magazine.
Oh, well, I did tell you that that was one of my favorites, but I
Yeah.
think that my ultimate favorite was by Jim Steranko.
This one is really good, and so I just want to say, they have biopics, and I was wondering why they gave 2 biopics of him.
They did? Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, one where he's like dressed up like he's going to the disco, and yeah, it's pretty funny. In the intro, they have pics of the authors. All right.
Oh, the pics inside the intro.
Introduction.
Sorry,
Yeah,
when you said biopics, I thought maybe there were pictures at the back where their biographies were.
go back another page. There, one more. There he is. They gave
Yeah,
him
I'm not
2
sure
pictures.
why they do 2. One is 1970 and one is 1971.
I know. I didn't know why. Was it a space filler? And then look over there because this is
But
really interesting.
So he became more fashionable in 1971. There wasn't even disco really yet. But this story is from 1969.
No, but look at that. That was the rejected cover by Kirby. That's one of the.
Oh yeah, I wish they
he
showed
left.
a bigger. That does not look like a Marvel cover, but that is a very cool look.
Yeah, and I guess he left because after this story for creative differences, because
Right.
Kirby Stan Lee kept changing things.
He had told Stan Lee, if you do one more change to any of my stories, I'm never working for you again.
And he did.
And Stan Lee changed the title, and then he never worked for him again, except that he came back and did Foom magazine, and he did some covers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this cover sort of shows me the direction he was going in. He was very interested in graphic design, and he started his own publishing company.
Yeah.
And it was all of his magazines were very in elaborate sort of design kind of stuff,
Yeah, I
which I
wish.
think is probably why he came back and did Foom, because he was interested in magazine design.
So if you look at the page that you're on, see how there's two giant pictures of him, and then
Yeah,
there's only a thumbnail of that. That's a huge
right.
mistake. It should have been the
I
opposite.
agree. I mean, I still am happy I bought the comic. I mean, the book. And this intro is packed with interesting thoughts, whether you agree with it or not. I
Yeah,
gather
definitely.
that David did not agree with a lot of it,
But I enjoyed it.
or Wally Wood. You can tell he's not healthy.
And Marie Severin.
Marie
She's so
Severin.
interesting. I wanted to talk about that picture, but we can come back to that later.
This one?
Yes.
This
He
is
looks
Barry
like he
Smith.
could play Thor.
Yes. Well, he looks like a character out of Conan. And
I mean, look at him. And look at the background. That is
he's
just
the only artist who looks like he could have drawn himself.
look at him. Wow. All right, go.
Like Marie Severin does not look like her characters. Wally Wood doesn't. Neil Adams definitely does not remind me, or John Buscema, of their drawings. But I guess Steranko, you could sort of picture being in a Steranko comic. So anyway, the very first story, they replaced the cover Steranko supplied them with this John Romita cover, but it is a picture from Steranko's story. And this is a pretty famous story. I'm pretty sure I've seen it reprinted in a number of places. But it's written and illustrated by Steranko, and it's done in this very unusual cinematic, sort of extreme cinematic style, right? And it's kind of it appears to be a haunted house story. And this couple is told they have to come to this house to get their inheritance.
Yeah.
And they're looking for, I guess they think there's money stashed away in this house. You would think they would think the house itself is worth a lot of money, but that's not the issue. They want to find the hidden money. And you get these
that panel is
really cool panels that show movement, but the whole panel is connected at the same time.
Yeah. So I had to do a double take because I didn't realize at first that the main figure is the woman. I thought it was the man, but then it's the woman, the man, and then it moves into the second one, and it goes man.
It does. He makes the woman's face so harsh that you at first, because of the way you read comics, think it's a man's face.
And also, I want to talk about the Digger because I think his Digger is phenomenal.
Yeah,
I think
no one else put any effort into the Digger afterwards.
And one of the letters page really criticizes that image and saying it's too EC and it's too like representative of something they need to go in their own direction. But I think that image is phenomenal.
Yes, I agree. And all the details make him very 1970s or 1969. The wide belt buckle, the flared pants, these kinds of shoes, and the vest.
Mm-hmm.
He looks kind of like Frankenstein.
Yeah, he absolutely does.
And everywhere,
that image of the house, it's so not realistic, right? But it's so beautifully done at the same time. It just goes up and up and up, right? It's divided in half, and the staircase won't wind. I mean, it's a gorgeous image. What a great way to start the comic.
Everywhere, Steranko is playing with graphics, right? It's more graphic. It's, I think he did the coloring. They don't give it credit, but plays with reflections in the water. I mean, he really cared about this. He put a lot of effort into this probably low-paid 7-page story. Yeah. But he's making a statement about where his art is going. So it's really sad to me that it didn't go any further at Marvel.
Yeah.
He did a few other projects over the years that built on this style. One is called Chandler. It's only available in a little paperback. And then he did an amazing adaptation of the movie Outland for Heavy Metal Comics, which also incorporates some of this graphic style. And just imagine how often do you see that much detail in a small panel?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And throughout, he does not stint on the effort. And it feels like every page has some different sort of graphic experiments. Like this thing here, to me, is amazing by cutting the sentence in 3 pieces and cutting his face into 3 pieces. It does something with comics that no other
Yeah, and
art
it gets
form really can
progressively
do.
darker. And
Yeah.
the next page, the top 2 panels, again, gorgeous. Look,
Right.
you get
And
the whole room broken into 3, and there was a
right,
criticism in the letter about that, but I think it's
right.
stunning.
I think it gives you the feeling of a panning of a camera, sort of.
Yeah. And then
And
that, look at that, very, like, that is in the bottom, very unrealistic, where there's a figure
right,
running up, stairs that are just blue and purple. Like, there's
right.
there's no detail there, but it's so beautifully done.
It's a graphic kind of statement.
Yeah.
But everywhere, even on this page back that we rushed past, but the using the tiny panels for the slight movement of the characters and everything, it makes this story, which is a perfectly fine kind of Twilight Zone-ish story, it makes it ultra intense. And here we have in the middle, when they discover this secret door, suddenly everything goes black and white except for the door. And then
And
another one.
those black and white images, there's a lot of them in here. There's especially one in the corner where there's a man in black and white. That really reminded me of what Frank Miller would do later.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you see it all the way in the corner? There's just a man who's sweating. It's kind of off camera right now.
Right.
No, it's on the other corner. The other corner.
Oh, okay. You jumping ahead of me.
Okay.
Yes, that Frank Miller does that kind of thing.
Mm.
Now, Donald Rex says he's channeling Krigstein. There was an artist, I think is his first name, Bernie Krigstein, who worked at EC, and I don't know if all these techniques come from Krigstein, but certainly some of them do. The chopping things up in time. But I do think he's adding his own twists to them, but I could be wrong. And Donald is saying that the stairs is pure
Johnny Craig.
Johnny Craig.
Which he's going to come up next.
There is Johnny Craig in here, but it's nothing like this.
Yeah, and he's next.
Yeah, so he may be pulling from these other people, but it's still for me, one of the most amazing 7 pages of comics that I've experienced. Hello to Max Apocalypse. One bad sneeze away from falling into the ground. And hello to Phil's Treehouse. So yeah, thanks for joining us. And anyway, the story progresses, and it has and I guess I'm spoiling it by showing the image, but I was not expecting that would be the end.
It had a very sci-fi weird ending, but you know what the ending reminded me of? Not Twilight Zone, but Night Gallery.
Okay, Night Gallery, I accept that. But the number of panels and the way he used panels, Donald doesn't want to take anything away from. I have read that he was very influenced. I think, if you look at his artwork over the short period of time he was doing comics, he kept picking up more and more influences. He showed a lot of Will Eisner influence too, I think. And I think that's a sign of the really talented artists when you see them continuously picking up more influences. And that's what made Frank Miller so great. He was constantly adding more and more influences to his work.
So that scene of 4 panels which are green there, I thought that was one of the most effective parts of this comic.
Yes.
That was and it did remind me of there's a Night Gallery episode where they go into a painting and the painting is moving as the guy's looking at it. And it does something like that. And it does exactly that. And I could just hear that Night Gallery music playing. And I thought this was really effective, how it zeroes in on him pointing. I thought that was really, really cool. And then you get the shocking color change.
Yeah, the amount of thought Steranko put into every sequence I don't think most artists put this much thought into an entire graphic novel of drawings in terms of what different things can I do for different effects.
Yeah, the colors, the detail, and then when there's no detail, it's for a reason. It's really beautifully done.
So, I mean, I can understand Stan Lee, like, part of his job was to change titles on things, but he really blew it by driving Steranko away.
Yep.
So if Steranko was stealing from Johnny Craig, it's hard to tell from this Johnny Craig story here, which feels pretty standard illustration. And they do mention that John Romita redrew a lot of the faces on it. So I don't even know what Johnny Craig's faces would have looked like. Maybe that's a Johnny Craig face. Now I'm trying to recall the Johnny Craig story. What happened in it?
It's that one right there.
It is. I know. I can't recall what the plot is, even though I'm looking at it. But
there's a guy who is trying to debunk seances just so that he can.
Oh, right.
One. Yeah.
Right. That was a decent enough twist, I guess.
That lady really looks like Vampirella to me.
But having mystics and debunking them and a haunted house, these are all familiar elements, right? And that's perfectly fine. Did you have one you wanted to highlight?
There's actually a bunch. I think issue number 1, 2, they're really, really good. They're the strongest of all the issues. But what surprised me is issue number 6, one of the last ones, was also a very, very strong issue. And if you want to look at art, Barry Windsor Smith's The Scream of Things in number 7 was
number 7. Different. Sorry. While you were saying number 6, I was turning to number 6.
That's on page 107 if you want to go there.
No, but you just said number 7. Oh, but we don't have. Oh, we do. The Scream of Things.
Yeah, okay, The Scream of Things is artistically just really, really interesting, and that is on. I'm trying to find it on myself. I forgot to write down the page.
It's page 126.
Thank you.
The sad thing about that is it's inked by Vince Coletta. But other than that, it is good.
Now, you were saying, I don't know if that makes a difference or not, because to me, I thought this was a really interesting story art-wise. Not at the beginning, but as you progress.
Right.
It becomes more and more psychedelic. Like as you look at page 131.
But if you look at the inking on, say, this arm here, it probably was, in pencils, it was probably very smooth and graceful looking, and it becomes sort of clunky and awkward once Coletta inks it, in my opinion. But,
yeah, you're right. The art is very clunky here,
right?
And
fact, I don't think Barry Smith's art was as clunky as the inker is making it. But anyway, he was the inker you could count on to hit the deadlines. So that's why he got so much work.
When you get to page 131, it starts to get really psychedelic. Well, actually, on page 130, you have a panel where it's psychedelic. The woman there with the red, the yellow, the blue, the white.
The faces start appearing in the bushes behind them.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And right above that, the woman has all those colors. But then look at the next page. You get all this kind of weird psychedelic imagery.
Yes.
Either it's a carpet that's psychedelic, and then her face becomes psychedelic. And as you turn the page, it just gets wilder and wilder. And I thought I enjoyed that, the craziness of the art in this, especially for it being near the end of the run, right? It was when it was almost done.
Was that the last original story they printed? No, the last was some Wally Wood stories, I think.
Yeah, and we might as well mention that Wally Wood is it's fantasy, right? And once Wally Wood started in here, I guess the fantasy stories kind of took off because this book went into a fantasy direction from then on.
After a while, yeah, it went into all reprints for a while. They changed the name to Creatures on the Loose, but continued to do reprints for a while. I have a Creatures on the Loose here. Where did it go?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I think you gave me this. Do you remember?
Yeah, it's a great cover. Look at that creature from Krogar.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are reprints of their old monster stuff. And then eventually it had Gulliver of Mars, which was kind of an Edgar Rice Burroughs-ish thing. And then Thongor, which was a Conan imitation.
Mm-hmm.
But so eventually Sword and Sorcery really took off. But I think this stuff predates the popularity of Sword and Sorcery. Although you can see people in the letters page requesting things like Conan. So let's see. What's another favorite of mine is a Wally Wood. So I'll go to that. I liked all the Wally Woods, but my favorite was the first Wally Wood called Flight into Fear. And it is written and drawn by Wally Wood, and Wally himself introduces it. I love all the detail Wally shows of his own office, although he's apparently in a dungeon. But I think other than that, this is probably exactly what he saw in his office that he drew.
Yeah, he's got a gargoyle above his desk.
And he does not stint in details. There's even spider and a spider web, a skull with a melting candle on it. And Wood, I mean, is not as experimental with layouts and graphics the way Steranko is, but he's definitely putting in a huge amount of effort into this small little story. Perhaps because he was the writer of it, or he still had energy to keep before alcoholism took over. But I thought it was a really good story. It kind of, the plot kind of reminded me of Richard Corbin's Den. In Den, it turns out that Den is just a teenage boy from our world who's not very competent, but then he goes to this fantasy world where he becomes the uber muscled hero Den. Oh. And in this one, the boy goes to a fantasy world, and in the fantasy world, he's a giant, and he's the chosen one, so to speak, to fight off this villain. And there's just, I don't know, I just love the way Wood visually progresses the story panel to panel. Again, lots of small panels to tell a lot of story in a short space. And just lots of inventiveness of the world and the creatures. And the idea that the boy realizes it's all a loot. Like, I love this scene where he realizes the bridge hasn't fallen in, it's an illusion, and he runs across. So very cool. And it actually has a happy ending. It's not a horror story at all. So I thought it was very cool. And I almost wish they did another story where the boy goes back. But it is kind of an outlier. It doesn't really quite fit the Tower of Shadows kind of feel.
Yeah, I guess he does.
He rides on a gargoyle and he fights an evil wizard. But it is weird that there just happens to be gargoyles in his town. But so anyway, I think one of the nice things about an anthology book is that you can get all different kinds of stories and different styles of art. What else did you want to highlight?
The one you closed the book, but I was going to ask you to look at that next.
No, I will open it back up, or we can go to.
It was but it was the next page that you were on, and I can't find the page. It was by I forget that one.
Oh yeah, this one had great. This is an example of an artist that normally I never even pay any attention to, and he did a great job here.
Yeah, that art this by Sid Shore, I really dug it. I mean, look at the detail on the car where the water is splashing on the window. The windshield wipers are wiping it away, but in the middle, you can see all the raindrops. And this one was funny, too, because it had a time travel element to it, which I really enjoy. And
that was clever. I did not see that coming either. Again, it looked like just a regular haunted house story.
And the ending is very romance cheesy, but I really dug it.
Right. They have a happy ending. And the weird thing is it says it was written by a teenage Jerry Conway. So he has a lot of understanding of marriages gone wrong for someone so young.
He's looking at his parents, I guess,
Right.
because that's all they do is yell at each other and call each other names. It's
Right.
pretty funny.
Love is completely gone seemingly from their relationship.
Yeah, and I love that panel in the very bottom where the woman in red is kind of jumping on the
Oh,
other
this
page.
one. Yeah.
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 I think that would have been beautiful if it hadn't have been a white background. If there had been a different color background, she would have really stood out more. Because they're supposed to be in a dark house. It shouldn't be a white background like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of stuns me that if Jerry Conway was 17 when he wrote this. A lot of these stories, and I think the same was true in EC Comics, involve marriages that are bad and bad bosses and things like that. Which
Well,
is
every person is irredeemable, and that's why they get their come of it. I mean, these people are
right.
bad. Like they're shown to be like true reprobates. There's no
Right.
like gray line. There's no like, oh, they do a little bit something wrong. No, these people are full on awful people from the beginning.
Whereas the successful Marvel formula was flawed characters who are basically good people.
Yeah.
And most of us relate to that more than just despicable people who have no redemption value.
And they deserve what they get.
And I think that's why this probably failed, because people were not turning to Marvel for that reason. You know, they were. I don't know what the psychology of it was that back in the early 50s, people did like this kind of story, but it might have been that the readers were quite a bit older, or they just came for the gore, and this doesn't have the gore. But speaking of old EC, I loved this one. I'm not sure which issue it's from, but it's called "To Sneak, Perchance to Dream," and it is plotted and drawn by Tom Sutton with a script by Denny O'Neil, and I guess it might even be on purpose an homage to the old color Mad Magazine, the early days of Mad Magazine.
Yeah,
and it has this hilarious couple of, I guess, Russian spies who are come to this classic haunted house to destroy a nearby nuclear power plant and create a gigantic nuclear explosion. But it's very comedic, but it also has these narration panels which are from the point of view of the haunted house that, because of some curse, has become sentient. And I thought it was a great juxtaposition between the sort of serious haunted house story and the buffoonish hey Earl Grey. Yes, I think you would like this book, Earl. Right, Donald says there is still code approved, so there was no blood, as David already said earlier. No blood, nothing really nasty happening. Earl Grey has one of the best channels on YouTube. I'm sure most people know that already, but I wanted to point it out. Especially if you're interested in European comics or alternative comics. Anyway, so I loved it. It has a very wacky art style, but also, like some of the other best ones in here, very detailed. No stinting on effort from the artist. So again, I think a lot of artists at this time were invested in this kind of story and wanted to put their best foot forward. And so it has a nice little twist that, again, is not quite what you would expect from a haunted house story, but makes a lot of sense and really works. So did you dislike this one, or did you like it?
No, I liked it. I thought it was it was fine. The that one and also the other one that's called Contact were a little bit more in a comedic vein.
Right.
And I don't know, comedy horror to me is not my favorite, but I didn't dislike it. But Contact
I love comedy horror.
Yeah. Contact was also a very good story about a man who's trying to make contact with aliens, and it has a very kind of fun comedic ending to that. Do you remember that one?
I do, but now I can't recall where it is in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a mad scientist like that. He looks very similar. It might even be the same drawer. He's got like an egghead with big glasses. He's
Oh,
kind
it's
of
a really short one, right? Like just 2
yeah,
pages?
yeah, and it's got this like twist ending, which is kind of fun, and it also looks like the the mad artist who drew Plop magazine.
Ah, Wolverton.
Yeah, but I don't think it is.
Let me find it. Hang on just a second.
Okay, I'll help you. It's called Contact. I wrote down the page numbers.
There, I found it. 116.
Okay, 116.
Yeah, so it's the other Tom Sutton book. So this mad scientist is trying to contact aliens. He succeeds, but when the aliens arrive, they just stomp on his whole house. That's the
Inadvertently,
foot
they
of an
kill.
alien coming down on him. So that was a fun little twist
And look at
story.
his
Hello,
feet.
Terrence, by the way. Hi, Terrence.
Right.
And hello to Brian LCS. Good to see you.
I think he has four feet, or at least three. The alien. And it's got big
Yeah,
pores.
it looks like 3 feet, unless it's 2 aliens, and we're seeing anyway. And their ship is even bigger, just seen in the background. Yeah, and it's fun to sort of combine again a sort of haunted house kind of look with suddenly a mad scientist and aliens.
And the person in the introductions was saying how the shadow on the wall, how gigantic it is, and the size of the ship, it all kind of figures into the size in this, because obviously the aliens are gigantic, and the person in the story didn't realize it, but you can see the giant shadow on the wall that's kind of looming over the scientist.
So yeah, for people who weren't here at the beginning, this is a fairly new collection, maybe a few weeks old, called Lost Marvels, that's being published by Fantagraphics, and it's printed in the high quality you would expect from Fantagraphics. So it's nice to get these obscure Marvel stories done that way. And apparently, the next one's going to be lost Howard Chaykin Marvel work.
Yeah.
I'm less of a Marvel Howard Chaykin fan, but I was hoping this one covers all the original work that appeared in Tower of Shadows, which I guess most of which has not been reprinted before. But I was hoping that the next one would be the Chamber of Darkness, but apparently, at least they're not immediately going to be doing Chamber of Darkness. But hopefully that's coming, because those were brother and sister things. So it's a bit, as you can see, it's a bit bigger than a regular comic. It's not gigantic, and it's not the overwhelming heavy omnibus. So it's a nice readable size.
It's gorgeous. The book is truly gorgeous. The way
There's the 10 pages, and it has we've already shown a very nice, even the table of contents is nicely designed and a really nice intro. So is there another story you want to highlight?
There is. I really like the one about the actor, but I think before we go to that one, we should talk about One Hungers, because they're saying that the introductory author was stating how that's one of the most standout stories in this volume, along with the And so
I
that
know
one's on
that I
page
read
40.
this as a kid, reprinted somewhere else. I think they might have reprinted it in one of their black and white horror magazines. It's written and drawn by Neil Adams.
Now and look at the digger guy or whoever he is. He looks creepy.
Indeed, yeah. I don't know if he is the same
think
guy or not.
Yeah, they keep changing in this one.
So I thought the setup was weird. But somehow this caveman era man or creature can feed on sound. And he's still alive in the modern day. And 2 hippies come across him in a haunted house or an old creepy house. and he feeds on their sound. So like when the woman screams, he grows bigger. But I guess he also causes things to burn. I just didn't find it. I mean, the Neil Adams art is Neil Adams art. It's good, but I didn't find the story very coherent.
Hmm.
Did you like it?
It was. I did. It was interesting. Also, this was the cover of it, and it's also the reprinted issue cover, which is number 9. They used this image, right, for that, and it's
So they
Ramita.
is that the yeah? So they started reprinting their newer stories even very quickly.
Yeah, and well, that one was sorry. This was the king size annual. They used this story for the king size annual,
Right.
right? And it's the same cover, except that the colors are different. If you look at the cover, there's browns in that cover, whereas this one it's turned to blue. It's a weird thing that they changed the colors. I guess they couldn't have the same exact cover.
Yeah, they often did that. I don't know, like when they would reprint things, like reprint old Fantastic Four, they would recolor them or something. The color makes a big difference.
Mm.
It's a much
And
darker,
yeah, this one I think that's the better
and it
image.
doesn't
And
say
just the other
Menace
one
of
has
the Hungry One, or does down here it says Don't Dare Miss the Hungry One, which is
yeah.
not the title of the story, right? It's One Hungers.
Yeah, one hungers. One hungers. I guess that's too strange of a title. But
I
it's
disagree. I disagree that it's one of the. I don't think it's one of the best stories in the thing. It's not a horrible story, and it has nice Neil Adams art, so that's nice.
it's certainly strange. It's got this atmosphere. It takes place over different eras. And then he was saying how for someone modern, like we don't we get this idea of a creature who goes after sound, and we have those modern movies where I forget what they're called, but the monsters come after if you make a sound. They can't see, but they go after anybody that makes sound, and
Yeah,
that's also the idea in the Lost of Us, and so that kind of idea has become a little bit common right now or
right.
used,
So it's a more
and
unique
they were
idea at the
saying,
time, possibly.
yeah, that is so that's interesting to think about, right? That might have been a
Right.
novel idea, and then at the end they have some kind of like it's kind of the cop out ending where did she scream or did she not? And
Right.
yeah,
I thought that was okay. If they would have defeated him if she didn't scream. But
yeah, they could have gotten away.
was he really so evil? Because all he wanted was sound to feed on.
Yeah, and
But anyway,
but yeah, but if I think if he gets a hold of them, he dissolves them.
he already touched the girl, and I don't think it hurt her. But they
Mm.
do show him creating fire later on.
Yeah, I'm wondering, does she get burned when he touches her? I don't know.
Um,
Poor misguided monster. Mm.
I think she's just grossed out, but I'm not sure. Well, even though I don't
I
love
like
the story as we
Hollywood
talk
one.
about it, it makes me realize all of these, maybe what I like about them is all of them take a twist on known horror story tropes, but each one has a twist that feels a little unique to me anyway. Hey, it's my friend Travis, the hiking man. We went on a hike last Tuesday, and I took me a day or two to recover. That was a tough one.
Wow. Well, good for you. It helps you get in shape in case you want to do another one.
Going up all those switchbacks give me buns of steel.
Ooh. Yeah, switchbacks are the worst.
You like mushy buns, but anyway, I want buns of steel.
I don't mind firm buns, but I don't want to do the work to get them. Mm. All right. I did like the Hollywood one, and that one's on page 86.
That was
I
a good
like the
one
art in
too.
it. That's a Barry Windsor Smith. And I like the ending. I thought that was cool art.
Right. This played on the Lon Chaney idea of a man of 1,000 faces in horror movies. And of course, the guy's a total jerk who treats the person who actually does the makeup horribly. And of course,
yeah,
he
it's a
expects
trope. It's a trope
Sorry?
that wears thin, right? It's a trope that wears thin. Every single person has to be a reprobate because within 7 pages they have to get what they deserve, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of get tired of that by the end. But it is what it is. Now look at that middle panel. It's so beautiful. It's so psychedelic. There are all these
This
like
one?
lights and colors, and like there's yellow,
Oh,
there's
this
pink,
panel
there's
there.
orange, there's
Yeah.
blue. The statues are just interestingly drawn. It looks like it's like a different kind of drawing in the middle.
Right. And this one has a better inker over Barry Smith, so it looks more like it should, I think. Dan Adkins is a good inker. So Bill Crabtree's here, and he asks, what paper stock do they use? It's a thick matte paper, and however they do it, they've recreated the old dots making the color, even though it's at a larger size. So they haven't redone the color with flat color. So I really like the paper, Bill, and the binding and everything like that.
It's very reasonably priced as well.
True. I think it's, what is it? List price of $35. So you can probably get it for at least $25, if not less.
Yeah.
If you look around.
It's absolutely worth the price. It is.
So yeah, this was a good story, I think, particularly because of the art. Because you could see it coming, what was going to happen to him here.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to be all original in
Right.
these horror comics, right?
No, and like if you ever read the current Shudder magazine or Vampirus, those stories are not original at all, but they're still fun.
Yeah.
So
I'm flicking through it. I think we covered everything. Page 2, page 3, page 5, page 99, and page 103.
I got a kick. It's my turn.
Yeah.
I got a kick out of Evil is a Bad Scene. And they play on the fact that they're trying to appeal to hippies, but dashing Don Heck staring at you from the wrong side of the generation gap, because you had to be under 30 to be cool. But Don Heck is an often maligned artist because maybe he wasn't the best at doing superheroes, but he is really doing a good job here, I felt. And I love the kind of the selfish hippie guy. The woman's doing all the work and he's just being cool. And for some reason, hippies and cult leaders and stuff really seem to go together. So it just seemed kind of fun. And again, the twist at the end, maybe I shouldn't give it away, but the twist at the end was the ultimate twist on hippies that I thought was really funny, coming from the avowedly middle-aged over the hill people.
Yeah. So you think the demon is going to drag them to hell, but he gives them their worst fear. And the worst fear is hilarious.
It is hilarious. So. Yeah. So I thought great art. And, although not as radical as Steranko or whatever, even Don Heck is doing interesting things with the layout to increase the tension and the feeling of horrible things are about to happen. I won't show the last page. But yeah, so that was another favorite of mine. Who wrote it? Someone named Alan Brodsky, who's written a number of the good stories in here. And that's not a name I've ever seen before. I think he must have, it said somewhere in here that he worked in The Office. So maybe he had a skill for horror stories, but didn't really take off with superhero stories. And a few issues, they include the letters pages, in which people request several times that instead of having horror hosts, they have the writers or the artists introduce the story, and either they just happen to make that decision on their own, or they actually took the reader's advice, as we were saying earlier. Eventually, like with this Don Heck story, either a writer or an artist introduces the story.
Yeah. The letters were really interesting because they were often very negative, and they printed everything.
Yeah,
I wrote down a
Marvel
quote.
was not afraid of negative letters then, and they just sort of they would reply cheerfully at the end, saying, "Well, we don't agree with you," or "We'll take that under advisement," or what have you.
Oh no, I can't find the quote that I wrote down, but they were. Oh, I'm sorry to say I was disappointed. It was only mediocre.
And you agree with that letter writer, I guess.
But he was writing. I think he was writing about the first story, the one that was
my favorite story, the Steranko story.
Yeah, they were bagging on Steranko, and they hated his digger guy.
Right.
So the letters page was pretty funny.
Here's your old buddy, Hall Yeah Comics. Good to see you.
Afternoon.
I heard you talking with him, mentioning to him he's already on his summer break, the lucky dog.
I know. I'm going to be on his show, I think, next Saturday morning. And then I was just invited to go on, or maybe it's Sunday. I was just invited to go on a show next Saturday night. I'm kind of worried because they show all this great art, and that they buy. It's like, you know how you buy stuff from Heritage Auction? They buy that kind of stuff. And then they go to cons and they get all their blank covers drawn, and they show all this stuff off. And I'm like, okay, I buy dollar comics.
Yeah, they're the fans who invest their money into the art. That's a big commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the digger wanted a raise. Well, the artist can't ask for a raise, so they took that. They made them the diggers. Summer break, baby. Sunday morning, David. 9:30 Eastern Standard. Don't go.
It's Sunday.
9:30 Eastern Standard. You're gonna have to start it.
Wait, that means 6:30 for me, right?
Yeah, on a Sunday morning. That's cruel. That's
after
cruel
being on the other one at night. All right. Do we have to drink beer at 6:30? Because this Tuesday one, you have to drink White Claw.
Maybe what you should do is Saturday night, just don't go to bed and keep drinking until it's 6:30 in the a.m.
Yeah, because
they would have a very drunk Garage Geek to deal with.
I still have one more week of work after that, so that's not recommended.
That's not fair. Okay, any more stories that you?
I took notes on almost all of them. There's always more to say. For me, this was when I'm glad that I did this, because each story I would read the notes in the back, and there's a beautiful notes section in the back that goes over the creators, and it can tell you like a good place to start. Like there was one artist in here who was famous during EC for those controversial covers. One where a woman has a severed head, and the other one where the guy is hanging. I actually looked them up, and I could show them if you want. But he did one of the stories in here. So for me, it was really interesting because I was able to. This was like they grabbed so many important people from like the EC era to work on this, and it was more of a window.
Really, I thought it was just Johnny Craig and Wally Wood. I mean, that's two more than most.
Marie Severin did almost all the covers.
Oh, she did coloring at EC. You're right.
And I don't know if there was. Well, there's Gary Friedrich was also very interesting. I don't know if he worked at EC, but he worked at Charlton, I think. And I was going to show some.
Wasn't he the publisher of Star Reach?
They had a whole independent comic list of everything that he did, and he actually went to court over Ghost Rider and Son of Satan.
Yeah, I know.
And there was just a lot of really interesting things. But he was funny because he wrote I was so damn busy, and I was either working, drunk, or both. And he became an alcoholic, and he had to go into recovery for that. And my dog just knocked on my thing. And the thing about it was he did some Charlton romance because he needed work, and one of them was called Tears in My Malted and Too Fat to Frug. And I got some pictures to show from that because it's pretty hilarious. But that's for Donald Rex. Like, this guy did romance at Charlton, which is pretty funny. But he's also an important writer because he did something new at the time. He wrote a war story where there was a man who loved war too much and he was killing people. And it was trying to show the line of killing for war or killing for pleasure. And for the time, it was quite controversial. So I just think like those kind of things were very interesting to kind of research for me, since I don't know a lot of the history of comics myself. So Johnny Craig, Don Heck, I didn't know a lot about. Gary Friedrich, also the one with Gary Friedrich, I pointed out, there seemed to be the reason I really researched him is that story seemed very homoerotic. And so I went and looked to see if he was actually gay, and he wasn't. But I couldn't understand all the homoeroticism in that story. I mean, if you look at the robot on page 37, along with everything else that goes on in that story, look at that robot, page 37.
Okay, you know what? But he was not the artist. The artist also was seemingly straight.
Yeah, but that robot, and then there's a scene.
This robot is a drilling robot for a mine, but you think that's a penis.
Well, not
and then
really.
His head is one of his testicles, I guess.
Unless you look at the rest of the story. Now, go back to the first panel and read it out loud. Read what Digger says.
Take it from old Digger. Machines are taking more jobs away from working men every day. Of course, there are some jobs it just wouldn't be respectable to have done by a hunk of steel, if you dig what I mean. Anyway, let me tell you about a man who heard voices.
That was it.
The hunk of steel is what you were focused on?
Yeah, done by a hunk of steel, if you dig what I mean. And then they show these men, like drilling, and then go ahead to, please turn the page and go to the middle top
These
panel.
things never occur to me, by the way.
Go to the middle top panel on page 35. And he says...
This one?
Yeah.
I was surprised that he turned out to be completely bald.
Yeah, that's true. The little guy says, and no hunk of steel could even have fun like you and me do either, right, boss? I don't know. To me, it just seemed too much. And then that robot coming with that giant drill. But anyways, I think I read a lot. I read too much into that story that wasn't really there, but it seemed like it.
As I was reading this story, I thought it was weirdly anti-working class. Like, instead of being sympathetic for these people having their jobs taken by machines, instead they're portrayed as sort of bullies and rapists who sort of deserve their bad fate.
And this guy,
that was kind of maybe a hippie thing because the blue collar people were pro World War Vietnam or something. I don't know, or like an Archie Bunker kind of thing.
And the ending is pro technology, whereas the whole story is against it, and then it turns out to be that's the message of the story.
Even at first, I was sympathetic with the working guy, but then he goes to a bar and beats up a guy so he can take his girlfriend away. And the girlfriend says, "Okay, basically close to a rape scene. I mean, the woman wasn't going to have a choice whether she could go home with him or not. Although then they throw in her saying, well, I do like manly men. But so I thought the politics of that were really odd.
It's a very strange story.
The story before that, which is another Don Heck story with a really great splash page. I
think the colors are off on that page. I think that could be way more effective if there hadn't been a white background.
Yeah, well, that's the way it is. I don't mind it. But what I thought was interesting about this one is it's about a publisher who steals the ideas of his writer. And if you really stretch it, this publisher kind of looks like Stan Lee, and the writer kind of looks like Roy Thomas. and it's written by Roy Thomas.
Mm.
So there was a couple of stories about people stealing other people's creative work and creative ideas, which I thought was interesting in the context of old comics, where their whole business was based on paying people very little money for their ideas and then exploiting them later for a lot of money. It had its own twist on what people expect about stories about witches and covens and things like that. But I'm trying to remember, there was another story that had a very strong feeling too of like, this is a metaphor for Stan Lee or Marvel Comics stealing my ideas. But you said you had some artwork or covers or something you wanted to show?
Yeah, but remember when I try to show it on my iPad, it doesn't come through like when I do it on my phone. I mean, I could try, but it was just the well, first of all, there's the couple of H.P. Lovecrafts that aren't in here, which I could show off the art for that. This is the next one in the series, which is the Howard Chaykin. That's going to be volume 2 in this series. But if you're interested in horror comics, DC Finest is releasing a horror anthology. It's coming out soon, and it's 70s horror, and it has a lot
Rusty says there's 2 more Lost Marvels. So I wonder what the one
the
after
third
Chaykin.
one. I was going to get a cover for that, but I forgot to write down the name, so I didn't get it. But yeah, there's a third one already solicited. And
Lefty, I dream about that all the time.
Any dreams later about hot dogs chasing? That's the famous cover. That Seduction of the Innocent was.
And that's Johnny Craig?
Yeah. And here's another one. That one with the lady with the severed head.
Also Johnny Craig, or is that someone else?
Yeah, they're both, I believe, Johnny Craig. And then this one is the Too Fat to Frog.
And who's that?
Friedrich, the writer.
Friedrich. Okay.
Yeah.
So he wrote it because he doesn't draw.
Yeah, and yeah, he's the writer. And here's another panel, and this panel is pretty hilarious. I was afraid, but as soon as I began to swing to the music, my troubles did disappear. And I knew that dancing was all I needed all along. Dancing and a guy like Ron to care. Too Fat to Frog. Funny.
Fat people are people too.
This is the Lovecraft one. And this one was by Barry Windsor Smith. And the style is so different from his other work in this book because it screams Jack Kirby. Mm-hmm. And like you could see the digger, even his foot looks like a Jack Kirby foot. That guy's face, it just looks so Kirby that I was surprised that this wasn't Jack Kirby. I'm going to give you another example.
And you liked those Lovecraft stories quite a bit.
I didn't like this one as much, but I liked the second one. I thought the second one was.
So this is the Terrible Old Man.
Yeah.
Where some burglars they want to steal the old man's gold, and it doesn't go well for them.
And I forget who this is, but this is an artist that was known for his psychedelic work, and it's apparent in this book. But
is that Tom Sutton?
It might be. I could look it up if you want.
Tom Sutton did a lot of Charlton work.
And I mean, look at that cover.
That's really nice. Really nice.
And there's another one. I think Donald.
I bet that's Tom Sutton.
And the next one, he was supposedly known for his black and white work in a lot of magazines. So here's an example of it. Of a kid running away.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And then the final thing that I have is here's the DC Finest. I don't think I ported over the picture. There's the DC Finest horror, The Devil's Doorway. So this is coming out pretty soon. But you can it's House of Secrets 81 to 85, House of Mystery 180 to 185. Phantom Stranger, Witching Hour 3 to 7, The Unexpected 113 to 117. So quite a different collection of horror, and I'm pretty sure that's what Gene Colan right there on the cover, most likely. So if you're a horror fan, this is coming out soon. You can pre-order it right now. And I thought that I had brought some pictures over of the other Lovecraft story, but I didn't. And I really liked that one, but it had a problem with it. And the problem with it is in the story, you can't see what's being described. You have to imagine it. But in the art, they have to draw something and put it there. And the art is never going to be as bad as your imagination. It ends up looking silly, right? And so if I've read the story before, and so I tried to imagine that you can't see what's there, and I thought the story was way more effective. But you have to subtract something in order to do that. And those are the pictures I had.
Another story I liked was by a very young Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan. And I just like this splash page is pretty incredible. And this was another story in which a guy kind of steals someone's ideas and then screws him over. Now the main plot is that a gypsy at the restaurant where they're having dinner while he's being told that he screwed him over, gives him a fortune that he's going to die in the presence of an Indian. And then he has all these different moments where he sees something of Native American stuff and he thinks he's going to die. But none of it kills him. And then finally he dies while someone hands him a urn of ashes from the ambassador from India, and then he dies. So it's not really that clever, but somehow I liked it. And I thought it was like comeuppance for the evil publisher, even though he wasn't a publisher, but that seemed to be the vibe of it. Here, well, why don't I do one more flip through? So your final thoughts on this volume? Are you glad you got it?
Absolutely, it's worth the money. I paid $25. The binding is gorgeous. The information involved in it, the artwork is so much fun. The stories are good. I mean, they're good. I don't think they're great, but it's a horror anthology, and it's hard to do something really amazing in a 7-page layout. But I think it's absolutely worth the money.
Well, I mean, I thought the 7 pages, they used them very well, and that they made better stories than people do with more pages. And I thought both the art and the stories were very effective. They're more about their imaginative twist endings than about, deep, horrific horror. But bad things do happen to people. And my other thought is that I'm sad it didn't last longer, but I guess I'm not surprised, because I think what really sold Marvel were these soap operas involving likable characters. But I thought, when I compare this to a lot of horror anthologies I've read, like the current ones that are marketed under the EC label from Oni, this stuff seems just way better to me, and better than the stuff that Warrant Publishing is currently doing. So anyway, I not only felt it was a great package, but great material. Once I got into the vibe of it, I think I just was really into it. And I'll probably be rereading them all again pretty soon. So I guess you're giving it like a B and I'm giving it an A or something along those lines.
I think for the money, it's an A+. It's absolutely worth it. I love
oddly, they just randomly give you some non-story pages, and
they
one or
always
two
in
add,
the letter pages. I guess
but not all the letter pages, only some of them.
I remember one comic said, "Oh, sorry, we don't have a letters page that month," and it might have been that one.
Well, that might have been part of it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for suggesting this video, and thanks for being free to do it. And I'm sure we'll be doing live videos again, since we have a lot of similar interests and we're on the same time zone. So neither of us have to wake up at 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday to do a video.
Oh Lord! And I've got 2 months coming. I've got 2 months off. I'm so happy.
Although summer months are not my months off, but
Mm,
we'll see.
yeah.
So,
You've
but
got
anyway,
some
thank you, and thanks to all the people who
blue
hung out in
fluffy
the
socks.
comments. Sorry, what'd you say, Dave?
You have blue fluffy socks on.
Do I? Did it
I
show?
can see them all the way down.
They're not fluffy. They're made of that kind of cotton that has white and blue in them,
All right.
like rag cotton or something. I think it's called. Here, well, look at my socks again.
No, I'm just saying I saw them.
For those who are nosy,
Or foot fetishists, I guess. Someone likes to show off his feet all
as
of
you
a
can
sudden.
see, I have very tiny feet. Look how they compare to my hands.
I think it's perspective right now.
Giant hands, tiny feet. So for anyone hoping for big appendages, they're going to lose out. I forgot that I still even had that view going. Okay, see y'all later.
Are you turning it off?